going to start very close to the beginning. Mason Starling, as was mentioned, is a champion fencer at her high school, which is the exclusive Gosforth Academy on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And Mason is at practice one evening, and a catastrophic storm blows through New York City. There are blackouts everywhere. It's craziness. They're trapped in the school's gymnasium because the brand spanking new mag locks on the gym disengage because there's no power, and that would be fine, except for the fact that Mason, aside from being a champion fencer, is also horribly claustrophobic, and she has been since she was a child. And it's not just small enclosed spaces, but the feeling of being trapped anywhere that tends to set off her particular phobia. So that's really all I'm going to tell you guys. I'm just going to start reading, and you can catch up. Okay?
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'd like to know that you're following along. Excellent. Here we go. Here we go. Toby, Mason said quietly. He didn't seem to hear her, probably because her throat was so dry her voice had barely come out in a whisper. Toby, she tried again. What's wrong, Mason? What was wrong? She was going to lose it any second, that's what was wrong. She was going to blow a mental gasket right in front of the hottest guy in school, his ice cream ex, her stupid, selfish brother, and by the time first period rolled around tomorrow, everyone at Gosforth Academy would know she was a claustrophobic freak. Toby, what is it? He asked again. Mason, we're stuck here until the power comes back on, so you might as well just relax. I can't. Ah, hell. Rory, her brother muttered. Here we go. Shut up, Rory. Mason, what do you mean? I mean, I'm not exactly good with confined spaces. I'm not good at being locked in. How not good? Toby asked quietly. Sweating, barking, screaming, uncontrollably psychotic episode, not good? Toby blinked at her. When? Soon. Yeah, well, that's just marvelous, Heather Palmerston said in tones laced with disgust. You puke on me and I'm punching you in the face, Starling. Yeah, that's not a problem, Heather, Mason said through her teeth. Her fists were tight, sweat slick knots of bone and muscle, and she couldn't seem to make her fingers unclench. I'm not really going to care what you do to me if it gets to that point. Suddenly, there was a loud thump against the heavy double doors, as though something had run into them at speed. And even Toby jumped at the sound. In the silence that followed, Mason could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then the howling started. Eerie and keening and somehow inhuman. What the hell is that? Heather said sharply. Even in the darkness, Mason knew the other girl was staring accusingly at her as if it might somehow be her fault. Is this some kind of joke? Come on, Heather, Callum said. He also seemed to sense the accusation in her tone. Mason had nothing to do with it, and it probably is a joke. Some jerk-ass Frenchman probably running around in this... Frenchman. No, not Frenchman. Freshman. And the storm cometh. Come into the tent. I told you, never talk about storms in your books. Come on, Heather, Mason had nothing to do with it. Probably as a joke. Some jerk-ass freshmen are probably running around in this stupid storm pretending they're ninjas. It's nothing to worry about. Yeah, look, Cal's right, Toby said. And anyways, nobody's getting in here anytime soon, ninjas or not. Just like we're not getting out. Sorry, Mace. There was another loud thump on the roof, followed by a frenzy of hammer blows from the front door, and the sounds of shrieking. In the darkness, Callum stalked over to the door and hammered back, shouting, "Knock it off, you losers! We're stuck in here! Go make yourselves useful, we got a freaking crowbar!" You know, Toby, maybe we should break a window or something, Callum suggested, and get the hell out of here. No, Toby said. Nobody is breaking any windows. Which was exactly when the tree of the quad came crashing down. As if in mockery of Toby's proclamation, Gosforth's ancient oak smashed through the heart of Gunner Starling's shining contribution to the brand new gym, the new rainbow glass window. The crowding branches of the venerable old oak tree looked as like Hundreds of reaching arms, all ending in grasping, black-taloned hands, were reaching for them. Sharp, glinting shards of colored glass flew through the air, and Toby and the students screamed with one voice, scattering for the far corners of the gym's long hall. The tree branches tore a gaping hole in the front of the athletic center, scattering leaves and heavy splintered limbs, and a screaming horde of nightmares came pouring through. Mason was the first to see them, dusky-skinned monstrosities, only vaguely human-shaped, with slack, rubbery flesh. "Toby!" she shrieked in a warning. The creatures were the same as the ones she'd seen outside the window, or thought she'd seen. Only there had to be a dozen of them at least, struggling to free themselves from the tangle of the fallen tree. Lightning flashed, illuminating the gym clear as day through the jagged opening in the roof, and the rain poured down in a chill deluge. I'm so sorry. So sorry. The shadowy things wrenched at the branches, disentangling themselves and heaving aside debris with inhuman strength. They moved in a disconcertingly staccato fashion, arms and legs bending at odd, sharp angles, but they were fast. Bluish-purple skin like drowned corpse skin stretched from bony frames, and lank hair hung from their scalps, tied back in long, ragged braids and rat tails. The creatures looked like something out of a big-budget Hollywood horror movie, zombies with eyes that glowed with a sickly milk-white light. Open mouths displayed ivory teeth bared in grimaces of madness and rage and bloodlust. This isn't happening, Mason thought. This was the psychotic episode she had warned Toby of earlier. This was it. Her mind was broken. But then Toby shouted. He waved his arms to draw the attention of the monsters as one of the things sprang at him. He snatched up a spare piece of scaffolding pipe and wielded it like a broadsword, smashing one of the creatures in the side of the head, and there was a sickening sound like the breaking open of an overripe pumpkin. The creatures howled in outrage and advanced on the fencing master until one of them swung its head in her direction, and Mason suddenly found herself locked in the beam of its baleful gaze. The creature's lips peeled back from its teeth in a horrible grin, and it barked out what sounded like some kind of command to the others. The things abandoned Toby and started to move toward Mason in a loose circle. She backed farther into the corner, almost whimpering in terror. Suddenly, a full-throated roar of rage cut through the din of the storm, and as wide as Mason's eyes already were, they got even wider. A pale shape she had seen earlier in the tangle of the oak wasn't another monster. It was a man. A young man rising from the wreckage in between her and the shambling, gray-skinned apparitions. And he was stark naked. As naked as the shining blade he held in his fist. He thrust out his free hand at Mason, warning her to stay back, and then turned and lifted his blade to defend as the creatures attacked again. Mason didn't move. She couldn't. Even in the depths of the blind panic that she was in, she couldn't help but watch in amazement as the strange young man turned and ran straight for one of the gray-skinned apparitions, sword held high over his head. He brought the blade down in a vicious arc and severed the arm of one of the creatures as if it were no more than chopping wood for a fire. Black, stinking blood erupted in a geyser from the terrible wound, painting an arc of darkness on the gymnasium wall. Another slash of the blade and the horrible thing's head toppled from its shoulders, but they just kept coming. In the darkness, it was almost impossible to keep track of the things. Mason heard Rory cry out, and Heather was screaming in terror. Toby shot a glance at the stranger, who nodded tersely at him and snarled, "Go!" The sword in his hand raised again, but Mason just stood there, frozen, as the creatures came at him again. "Run for the cellar storage," Toby croaked, appearing at Mason's side out of the darkness. "You mean underground?" she said. Her stomach lurched. "Now, Mason, while he's got those things occupied." As the others ran past her and descended into the darkness, Mason hesitated, her claustrophobia threatening to overwhelm her fear of her attackers. She glanced back at where the young man stood poised to defend against the next surge. She could barely see him in the gloom, but she knew when she turned her head that he was looking directly at her. And she knew in that moment that his eyes were ice blue. "Go," he urged her. "I can't," she whispered back, his gaze locking with his. His sword arm dropped to his side, and he stood there, still as a statue, sculpted by the white gold flashes of lightning, the sudden calm at the eye of a maelstrom. "Yes," he said quietly, "you can." She glanced back at the hole in the floor. "I can't." "It'll be all right, I promise." She looked back at him. Somehow Mason had heard his voice over the cacophony of the storm, and she felt, very suddenly, like she stood in an empty house with all the windows open. "Go." She nodded and spun on her heel, ducking down into the storage cellar. Toby reached up behind her and pulled the trapdoor shut. A fraction of a second later, something heavy slammed into it, and they heard howling. The stranger had bought them time to make it down safely into the storeroom, and now he was out there, defending them. Toby jammed his scaffold pipe diagonally through the ring handles of the door, effectively barricading them in. The sound of fighting continued above them for several long minutes, and then stopped, abruptly. They waited, but the only things they heard were the wind and the rain that poured straight down into the gym's roof. Toby felt around on one of the shelves and found a flashlight. He clicked the switch, and the pale beam of light rendered the details of the cellar in stark black and ash gray, and turned their faces ghastly white. For a moment, everyone just stood around. Then a heavy knock on the door overhead made them all jump. "Let me in," came a gruff voice. "No way, man!" Rory exclaimed. Toby hesitated. "Let him in, Toby," Mason said. "He just saved us." The fencing master stood there, torn. "Toby," Heather looked at him. "Ah, hell." Toby wrenched the pipe out of the door's ring handles, and Rory shook his head in disgust. The stranger heaved the door open and climbed down, pulling it shut behind him. At the bottom, he leaned heavily on the stairs for support, breathing harshly. In the beam from Toby's flashlight, all of the contours of his body stood out in sharp relief. He looked like a Michelangelo sculpture, Mason thought. "Bar the door," he said. "Do it," Toby barked at Rory, handing him the metal pipe. "And somebody else find Beowulf here some pants." It's Fenris Wolf," the young man rasped. "And yeah, pants would be nice."